I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Maggie Tokuda-Hall, a children's book author, most recently of Love in the Library. Maggie, good to see you.
Diane, thank you for having me.
So we're talking about the situation with Scholastic, basically offering to distribute your book on certain conditions. So let's start, if you don't mind, with the book itself, Love in the Library. What is it about?
Love in the Library is the true story of how my maternal grandparents met in a Japanese incarceration camp called Minidoka during World War II. And it is true, like my grandmother really was the camp librarian, and every day my grandfather would go in and check out huge stacks of books he had zero intention of reading.
Yeah.
So he could go flirt with her, and they fell in love and they got married and they had their first son all in Minidoka.
And so the book was initially published, is it by Candlelight Press?
By Candlewick Press, yeah.
Candlewick Press. So the book was initially published by Candlewick Press, and then Scholastic came. Tell me about that, because that must be exciting for every children's book author, as a mother of three who's been to many a Scholastic book fair.
Yeah, exactly. So you got it in one. Scholastic has a really unique relationship with the kids of America. They go directly to schools. And so they have the arm of their company that publishes their own books, but they also have the education division that licenses a lot of other books to take into schools. And so I was thrilled when I got an email from them with an offer to license Love in the Library.
What happened? They wanted some changes to your author's note in particular.
They sure did. So there's a paragraph in my author's note that I know can be divisive. I get angry emails about it now and again, but that connects what happened to my grandparents to things that still happen now. Because in my opinion, telling their story in isolation as though it was this aberrant instance does both them and all 120,000 Japanese Americans they were incarcerated with a real disservice to pretend like this was just them and it's never happened to anyone else again. So they asked me to cut that entire paragraph. But beyond that, they also asked me to cut the word racism from the author's note altogether. And
for what reason? What was the reason they gave you for those cuts?
The reason they gave was that in this quote politically sensitive moment, those words would limit the amount of people they felt confident they could sell the book to.
What's interesting about this to me is that it's the author's note. It's not the text itself. And what do you see the author? I mean, is the author's note a message to kids in your mind? Is it a message to teachers? How do you think about that as sort of related to the story you've just told?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good question. An author's note isn't necessarily for the kids. Curious kids can attend to it if they want to, but the bulk of the story is for the children. The author's note is like a roadmap for parents and teachers and librarians to follow when they're looking for how do we talk about this story now that we've read it. And what that allows the story to do is function more cleanly, like it's a craft choice, so that you're not constantly belaboring the point of this was racism, this was bad. You can show some of that with the images, and you can let kids come to their own conclusions when they see guards with guns pointed in at innocent people. They're able to make those connections themselves. But as they start to ask questions, sometimes adults can feel a little like they don't necessarily know exactly how to talk about it. And that's what the author's note is for.
Maggie, you have the book with you right now. Do you want to, first of all, let's hold up the cover. It's a very beautiful cover, I thought, of your excellent. And why don't you read us the author's note that Scholastic wanted you to cut?
Sure. That is not to say that it was, quote, worth it. Their improbable joy does not excuse virulent racism, nor does it minimize the pain, the trauma, and the deaths that resulted from it. But it is to situate it into the deeply American tradition of racism. As much as I would hope this would be a story of the distant past, it is not. It's very much the story of America here and now. The racism that put my grandparents into Minidoka is the same hate that keeps children in cages on our border. It's the myth of white supremacy that brought slavery to our past and allows police to murder Black people in our present. It's the same fear that brings Muslim bans. It's the same contempt that creates voter suppression, medical apartheid, and food deserts. the same cruelty that carved reservations out of stolen sovereign land, that paved the trail of tears. Hate is not a virus. It is an American tradition.